The sterile air of the lawyer's office bites at my lungs. My hands, usually restless, lie flat on the polished mahogany table, anchor points in a storm I never saw coming. Across from me, Mr. Henderson, his face a mask of professional concern, slides a document forward. It's thin, unassuming, but the weight of it crushes the air out of the room. It's the formal declaration. His intention. To take it all. The company. My company. The one I built, brick by painstaking brick, late night by later night, dream by desperate dream. The room holds its breath, waiting for me to shatter. But something cold, hard, and unfamiliar settles in my gut. It's not despair. Not yet. It's the quiet click of a lock, sealing something vital away. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Before the sterility, before the legal terms and the cold weight of paper, there was warmth. There was color. There was us. Or what I thought was us. I met Mark when I was 24, fresh out of design school, bursting with ideas but broke and working a dead-end retail job. He was older, established, charming. He saw something in me, he said. A spark. A vision. He'd talk about my designs, the way my mind worked, the way I saw beauty in the everyday. He made me feel seen, heard, loved. The company wasn't born overnight. It was a slow simmer, a collection of sketches, prototypes built on my kitchen table, late nights hunched over a sewing machine. It was small, bespoke pieces at first. Handbags, leather goods. My passion project. I'd sell them at local craft fairs, online. Every sale was a tiny victory, a confirmation that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't crazy for pouring my life into this. Mark was supportive then. He'd come to the fairs, help me set up, beam proudly when someone admired my work. He'd bring me coffee during my late nights, tell me to take a break. He was my biggest fan, my rock. Or so I believed. As the business grew, it needed a name. Something that felt strong, personal. Something that captured the essence of what I was trying to create. We'd brainstorm names over dinner. He'd suggest things, practical, market-focused. I wanted something with soul. One night, sketching in my notepad, the name just came to me. A combination of things, a feeling, a whisper of a memory. I scribbled it down. Elysian. It felt right. Perfect. I remember showing it to him, my heart a little jumpy. He'd smiled, that warm, approving smile, and said, "That's it. That's the 1 inch." Getting the business off the ground properly was hard. So hard. It wasn't just design and creation. It was sourcing materials, managing production, marketing, sales, shipping. I did it all. Every single bit. I learned accounting software, built a website from scratch, negotiated with suppliers. There were months I barely broke even, months I poured every penny I made back into raw materials or equipment. Mark was successful in his own field, finance. He had a steady income, a stable career. He never invested money directly into the business in those early years. Not a dime. But he was there, providing emotional support, occasionally offering business advice from his world, helping me think through pricing or strategy. It felt like a partnership, even if the heavy lifting, the creative core, the sheer physical labor was mine alone. We got married 2 years after I started the business. By then, Elysian was starting to gain traction. I had a small studio space outside the house, hired my first part-time assistant. The brand was building a reputation for quality, unique design. It was still small, nowhere near matching Mark's income, but it was mine and it was growing steadily, surely. Marriage felt like the natural next step. We were happy, building a life. His career was soaring, mine was taking root. We were a power couple, people said. Both driven, both successful in our own ways. The future felt bright, limitless. As the years passed, Elysian grew from a small bespoke operation into a legitimate company. We expanded the product line, moved into a larger workshop, hired more staff, production assistants, marketing help, customer service. I was the creative director, the CEO, the driving force. Mark would sometimes come by the workshop, chat with the staff, ask about sales figures. He seemed proud of my success. He'd introduce me at parties as my wife, the entrepreneur, the brains behind Elysian. He'd joke about retiring early on my earnings. It all felt good. Solid. The first crack appeared so subtly, I almost missed it. A comment here, a casual dismissal there. I'd be talking about a new collection, the challenges of scaling production, and he'd nod, but his eyes would glaze over. He started referring to the company not as Elysian or my business, but as our shared venture. The business we built, it felt strange. Unsettling. I built it. With my hands, my mind, my sweat, my tears. Yes, he was supportive. Yes, he offered advice, but he didn't build it. Not in the way I did. I pushed the feeling down. Maybe I was being sensitive. We were married, after all. Everything was ours, wasn't it? The request started small. Could he see the financial statements? Just a quick look, for his own interest. Of course, I said. He was good with numbers. Maybe he'd spot something I missed. Then it was questions about supplier contracts, customer data, marketing strategies. It felt less like supportive curiosity and more like scrutiny, like he was auditing me. My team noticed it too. They'd exchange glances when he'd drop by unannounced and start asking pointed questions. The atmosphere in the workshop would shift, from creative energy to guarded tension. Then came the pressure. Not overt, not at first. Just suggestions. Maybe I should bring in a real CEO. Someone with serious business experience. Someone who could take Elysian to the next level. He knew people, he'd say. People from his world. Finance people. People who understood scale, investment, maximizing profit. My gut twisted. I understood scale. I understood investment. I understood profit. But I also understood design, craftsmanship, brand identity, and the fragile ecosystem of a creative business. I wasn't just running a company. I was nurturing a vision. His suggestions felt like a threat to that vision. He wasn't suggesting help. He was suggesting replacement. The arguments started then. Small ones, simmering below the surface of our lives. About the business, always about the business. My decisions were too slow, too cautious. I was leaving money on the table. I was too emotionally attached. It's a business, not your diary, he snapped one night, after I refused to cut corners on material quality to save cost. The phrase stung. It wasn't a diary, but it was part of my soul. He didn't seem to understand that. Or maybe he did, and that's exactly why he said it. The turning point in our marriage, the moment the foundation truly crumbled, was when he suggested I take on outside investors from his network. He had a deal structured, ready to go. It would give him, or his associates, a significant stake. He framed it as freeing me up, giving me more creative time, taking the burden of the business off my shoulders. It felt like a cage. A gilded cage, perhaps, but still a cage. I would lose control. The vision would no longer be mine alone. I said no. A firm, unequivocal no. His face changed then. The charming mask slipped, revealing something cold, hard, utterly unfamiliar. His eyes narrowed. You're being unreasonable, he said, his voice low, dangerous. This is a huge opportunity. For us. For us? I echoed, the words tasting like ash. Or for you? The silence that followed was deafening. It wasn't just an argument anymore. It was a declaration of war. After that night, the atmosphere in our home became unbearable. We lived like polite strangers, circling each other, the air thick with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. He stopped pretending to be supportive. He was openly critical, dismissive. He started talking about divorce. Casually at first. Maybe this isn't working anymore, maybe we want different things, and with every mention of divorce, the focus would inevitably drift back to the company. My company. He made it clear what he wanted. He wanted half. Not just half of the marital assets, the house, the savings, the investments. He wanted half of Elysian. Half of the company I built. He argued it was a marital asset, built during our marriage, supported by his income and his advice. He claimed he was instrumental in its growth, that his guidance was invaluable, that he was a de facto partner. His narrative twisted our shared history, painting himself as the strategic mastermind behind my creative talent. The first time his lawyer contacted mine, the language was stark, aggressive. They presented his claims, inflated his contributions, downplayed my role. They valued the company using aggressive metrics, painting it as a cash cow ripe for splitting. Reading the letter felt like being punched in the gut. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about identity. They were trying to take away the tangible proof of my worth, my passion, my life's work. They were trying to erase me. My initial struggles were purely emotional. Shock, disbelief, a profound sense of betrayal. How could the man who supposedly loved me, who watched me pour my heart and soul into this business, try to take it away? The pain was physical. It clawed at my throat, tightened my chest. I couldn't focus. I'd stare at spreadsheets, at design sketches, and see only his face, cold and calculating. The work I loved became tainted. The thought of him having any part of it, controlling it, profit from it, was sickening. My lawyer, a kind but weary woman named Eleanor, listened patiently. She explained the law. In our state, assets acquired during the marriage were generally considered marital property, subject to equitable distribution. She said his claim wasn't unusual. It was common for spouses of entrepreneurs to claim a stake in the business, especially if they provided support or claimed involvement.
My heart sank.
Equitable.
Fair.
Was it fair that he, who had provided coffee and occasional advice, could claim half of the entity I had bled for? Eleanor asked for all my documentation. Business formation papers, financial records stretching back years, emails, everything. She needed proof of my sole ownership, my primary role, the origins of the business. I spent weeks gathering everything. Boxes and boxes of files. Early sketches, funding applications I'd filled out alone, lease agreements for tiny workshops signed only by me, invoices from suppliers I'd found and negotiated with myself. It was a trip down memory lane, a painful reminder of the sheer grit it took to get here. And with every document, the injustice burned hotter. He wasn't just trying to take my money, he was trying to steal my story. His legal team was relentless. They filed motions, demanded endless discovery, questioned my staff, my suppliers, even past clients. They were digging, looking for anything to support his narrative of shared creation. They twisted facts, took comments out of context. They argued that his stable income supported us while I built the business, which was true, but they framed it as him funding the business, not just our life together. They argued his business acumen was essential to scaling up, pointing to periods of rapid growth that coincided with his increased interest, which I saw as increased interference. The pressure mounted. Legal fees were astronomical. The constant demands for information were a massive drain on my time and energy, pulling me away from running the business. Sales started to dip because I was distracted, unable to give Elysian the focus it needed. My staff were worried, the tension palpable. Rumors spread. Was Elysian stable? Was the divorce going to shut us down? The uncertainty was a poison, slowly crippling the company from the inside. His confidence grew with every legal maneuver. He seemed to genuinely believe his own narrative now. That he was the wronged party, the visionary who had been denied his rightful share. He'd see me at depositions, at court hearings, and his gaze would be cold, triumphant. He was winning. He knew it. Eleanor tried her best, but the law was gray. Marital asset laws were designed for tangible property, joint investments, not the intangible value of a brand built on one person's talent and tenacity. It felt like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and the system seemed rigged in his favor. I started to lose hope. The relentless pressure, the financial strain, the emotional exhaustion, it was all too much. I woke up every morning with a knot of dread in my stomach. The future I had worked so hard to build felt like it was slipping through my fingers. What if I lost? What if I was forced to sell half of Elysian to him? The thought was unbearable. I imagined him in board meetings, making decisions that would cheapen the brand, prioritize profit over quality, dismantle everything I believed in. It would be a slow, agonizing death for my creation. For a brief, terrifying period, I contemplated just giving up.
Settling.
giving him a chunk of money, whatever it took, to just make him go away and leave my business alone. But the thought felt like a betrayal of myself, of every late night, every sacrifice. Eleanor kept pushing for documentation. Anything, Sarah, she'd say. Anything that clearly establishes your sole ownership, your role as the founder. Right from the very beginning, we had the business registration papers, the articles of incorporation, all listing me. But he argued he instructed me on filing them, that he was the guiding force. We had early bank statements. The initial capital was small, personal savings. He argued his income supported my ability to save and invest. Every piece of evidence seemed to have an angle he could twist. One rainy afternoon, sifting through a dusty box in the back of my old storage unit, a box I hadn't opened in years, I found it. Not what Eleanor was specifically asking for, but something else. Something I had almost forgotten about. Early files from the very, very beginning. Before Elysian was even officially Elysian. Sketches. Business plans written out longhand in cheap notebooks. And nestled among them, a crisp, official-looking document. The trademark application. It was for the brand name Elysian. I remembered filing it myself. A painstaking process back then, navigating the government websites, filling out forms that seemed designed to confuse. I did it early on, probably within the first year, before the business was even formally incorporated as an LLC. I wanted to protect the name, the logo, the visual identity I was creating. It felt like a crucial step, establishing ownership of the brand itself. I pulled the document out, my hands trembling slightly. The date at the top. It was several months before we got married. And then my eyes fell to the applicant name. It wasn't my married name, the name I used on all the company's current official documents, the name Mark's lawyers kept seeing. It was my maiden name, Sarah Jenkins. A sudden, sharp intake of breath. The air in the dusty storage unit felt thin. Sarah Jenkins. Not Sarah Miller, his last name. The brand, the core identity of Elysian, was legally established and owned by Sarah Jenkins. A person who existed independently of Mark Miller. A person who built this thing when Mark was still just her boyfriend, offering occasional encouragement over dinner, not a supposed co-founder or strategic partner. I stared at the document, a strange mix of disbelief and dawning comprehension washing over me. Could this be it? The key? It wasn't just about the business entity itself, the LLC that was formed later during our marriage.
It was about the brand.
The name, the mark. The very heart of Elysian was legally tied to me, as me, before the marital entanglement he was now using to claim ownership. I clutched the document, my heart pounding. This wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a weapon. A precise, perfectly aimed weapon that cut through all his convoluted claims of shared creation and marital contribution. The brand, the soul of Elysian, was born solely from Sarah Jenkins. And the trademark proved it, with an official date stamp that predated our legal union. I drove straight to Eleanor's office, the trademark document clutched in my hand like a winning lottery ticket. I was shaking, not from fear anymore, but from a surge of adrenaline, a fierce, cold determination I hadn't felt in months. Eleanor looked up, her face weary from our last difficult meeting. "Sarah, what is it?" I laid the document on her desk. "Eleanor, look at this." She picked it up, her brow furrowed. She read the date. She read the name. Sarah Jenkins. Her eyes widened slightly. She looked at me, then back at the document. She picked up her reading glasses, put them on, and read it again, slowly, carefully. The silence stretched, thick with anticipation. Finally, she lowered the document, a slow smile spreading across her face. It wasn't her usual tired smile. It was sharp, intelligent, dangerous. "Sarah," she said softly, her voice filled with a new energy I hadn't heard before. "Where did you find this?" "Storage," I whispered. "From the very beginning."
Before
Everything." She leaned back in her chair, tapping the edge of the document against her desk. "This changes things," she said, her voice gaining strength. "Significantly." She explained it to me. The trademark wasn't just a business asset.
It was the core business asset.
The brand name, the identity. That's what held immense value, especially in a design-driven company like mine. While the later formed LLC might be subject to marital property laws, the ownership of the fundamental brand identity, established legally before the marriage and registered under my maiden name, created a powerful argument for my sole ownership of the most valuable part of the business. It directly contradicted his claims of being involved in the founding or early development. It was proof, dated and official, that Sarah Jenkins created Elysian, not Sarah Miller and her supportive husband. A plan began to form, a cold, hard strategy replacing the despair. We wouldn't just defend against his claims anymore. We would use this. We would go on the offensive. Eleanor saw the shift in me. The defeated woman who had sat across from her for months was gone. In her place was someone sharper, colder, fueled by a quiet, potent rage. We prepared. Eleanor brought in a specialist in intellectual property law, someone who understood the power of trademarks in divorce cases. They built a strategy centered entirely around this document. We wouldn't show our hand immediately. We would let him continue with his aggressive, fabricated narrative. We would let him detail his supposed contributions, his crucial role, his claims of shared creation. We would let him dig his own grave of lies. The date was set for a mediation session, a final attempt to settle before a lengthy, public trial. Mark would be there with his lawyer. I would be there with Eleanor. The stakes felt impossibly high. My future, Elysian's future, hung in the balance. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a victim walking into a trap. I felt like a predator, carefully stalking its prey. I walked into the mediation room, my spine straight, a neutral expression on my face. Mark was already there, sitting beside his lawyer, a smug, confident look on his face. He avoided my eyes. His lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Miss Sterling, gave me a tight, professional nod. Eleanor and I sat opposite them. The air in the room was thick with tension, the kind you could almost taste. The mediator, a calm, gray-haired woman, began by outlining the process. She invited Mark's lawyer to present their position. Ms. Sterling launched into their narrative. She spoke of Mark's unwavering support, his financial contributions to the household that allowed me to pursue my hobby, his invaluable business advice that helped turn a small craft operation into a successful company. She painted a picture of a man who had generously nurtured his wife's talent, only to be unfairly shut out of the success he helped create. She presented financial figures, projections, arguing for his entitlement to half the business value. His narrative was smooth, polished, full of confident assertions that I knew were fundamentally false. He sat there, nodding along, occasionally interjecting with a seemingly heartfelt comment about our shared dream and the future we planned. I listened, my face impassive, a cold calm settling over me. Every word was a carefully constructed lie. He wasn't just claiming money, he was trying to steal my history, my identity, my sacrifice. The betrayal felt fresh again, a bitter taste on my tongue. But beneath the bitterness was the hard, clean edge of my secret weapon. When it was our turn, Eleanor spoke first. She addressed the financial figures, the valuation, presenting our own, much lower, assessment based on my solo contributions and the ongoing risks to the business. She refuted some of the specific examples of his supposed invaluable advice, framing them as unsolicited suggestions, often ignored. It was a standard defense, chipping away at their claims, but it wasn't the main event. I could see Mark and Ms. Sterling growing impatient. They felt they had the upper hand, based on the general interpretation of marital property laws. They were waiting for us to concede, to negotiate giving him a significant payout. Then Eleanor paused. She looked directly at Mark and his lawyer. Her voice shifted, becoming sharper, clearer. "We've heard Mr. Miller's claims regarding his involvement in the creation and growth of Elysian," she said. Claims of a shared dream, of being integral to its founding. She picked up a document from the file in front of her. Not the trademark yet. Something else. Here is the official certificate of formation for Elysian LLC, filed on date, during marriage. It lists my client, Sarah Miller, as the sole founder and managing member, She placed it on the table. Ms. Sterling shrugged slightly. Standard stuff for a wife's business started during marriage. Now, Eleanor continued, her voice low but carrying immense weight. Mr. Miller claims his involvement goes back further, to the very inception of the brand, before the formal business entity was even established. He claims he helped conceive the idea, nurtured the vision from its earliest stages, making it a joint venture from day one. And she paused again, letting the claim hang in the air. Mark looked confident, nodding slightly. Then she picked up the document. The trademark certificate. The air in the room seemed to crackle. She didn't slam it down. She placed it, carefully, deliberately, on the table between the two parties. Her voice was quiet, but it resonated through the room. This document, she said, her eyes fixed on Mark, is the U.S. trademark certificate for the brand name Elysian. It was filed on date, significantly before the marriage. And as you can see, she gestured to the applicant name. The applicant and registered owner is Sarah Jenkins. The effect was immediate and devastating. Ms. Sterling stiffened, her eyes darting from the document to Mark. Mark's face, moments before radiating smug confidence, went completely white. The color drained out of him, as if someone had pulled a plug. His jaw went slack. He stared at the document, at the name Sarah Jenkins, as if he'd never seen it before. Sarah Jenkins, Eleanor repeated, letting the maiden name hang in the air like a final, damning verdict. My client's name before she married Mr. Miller. This trademark was filed, establishing legal ownership of the core brand identity, several months prior to the marriage date. It proves that the concept, the name, the legal identity of Elysian was conceived and owned solely by Sarah Jenkins, independently of Mr. Miller. His claims of being a co-founder, of being involved from the very beginning, are directly contradicted by this official, dated document. The silence in the room was absolute. The mediator leaned forward, examining the document carefully. Miss Sterling was whispering urgently to Mark, who was visibly shaken, his eyes wide with disbelief, and something that looked very much like panic. He mumbled something, shaking his head. He had been so focused on the LLC, the assets acquired during the marriage, that he had completely overlooked the foundational layer, the trademark, filed under her maiden name, a ghost from before their union. Eleanor continued, her voice gaining power with every sentence. This trademark is the most valuable asset of the business. It protects the brand, the goodwill, the reputation. Without it, the LLC entity is significantly less valuable. As the sole owner of the trademark, registered before the marriage, Ms. Jenkins' ownership of the core of Elysian is undeniable. Any claim Mr. Miller has to the business, based on it being a marital asset, is severely undermined, as the primary value lies in the brand established solely by Ms. Jenkins. She went further. She argued that Mark's aggressive pursuit of the business, his attempts to take control, now looked less like a spouse seeking a fair share and more like an attempted hostile takeover of an asset he knew wasn't truly his to claim from the start. His entire narrative, built on lies of co-founding, crumbled under the weight of that single document. Ms. Sterling tried to recover, mumbling something about marital contribution to the growth of the business after the trademark was filed. But the air had gone out of their argument. The core claim, that this was a joint venture from the beginning, was dead. The mediator, looking sternly at Mark, stated that the document significantly shifted the perspective on the primary ownership and valuation of the business. His leverage had evaporated. The rest of the mediation was a blur of hushed, furious arguments on their side and firm, confident positions on ours. Mark, pale and visibly shaken, kept looking at me, his eyes no longer smug, but filled with a mixture of anger and disbelief. He had been so sure of himself, so certain he could legally wrest control of my life's work. He had planned, strategized, hired expensive lawyers. And he had been undone by a single piece of paper, tucked away in a dusty box, a legal document filed by the young woman he thought he could erase. The twist wasn't just that I kept the company. That was the outcome. The plot twist was how I won, and how completely it destroyed his position. His entire legal strategy, relied on proving he was a foundational partner. The trademark proved, irrefutably, that he was not. This didn't just protect the company, it shattered his credibility with the mediator and, likely, with his own lawyer. It painted his entire claim as predatory and dishonest. The victory was bigger because it wasn't just about the asset, it was about the truth, about vindication. He didn't just lose the company. He lost face, he lost his false narrative, and his position in the rest of the divorce negotiations weakened considerably as his initial claims were shown to be based on a fundamental lie. He was completely blindsided, his own arrogance and oversight regarding the early paperwork proving to be his undoing. He had aimed to take my company and wound up dismantling his own leveraged position in the divorce. The divorce settlement, when it finally came, was far more favorable to me than it would have been. With his claim on a lesion effectively nullified by the trademark, he had significantly less leverage. The focus shifted back to the genuinely marital assets, which were split more equitably, without the distortion of his inflated business claim. I kept Elysian, free and clear. It was mine legally and emotionally, just as it had always been in my heart. The aftermath was quiet. The storm had passed, leaving behind a strange, still landscape. Winning felt less like triumph and more like weary survival. I had defended my creation, my identity, but the cost was immense. The emotional toll of the betrayal, the legal battle, the constant stress, it left scars. Going back to Elysian felt different. The tension was gone, replaced by a sense of relief among my team. But the experience had changed me. I was harder, perhaps, less trusting. The vibrant passion I had felt for the business was now tempered by a cold knowledge of how easily something you build with love can become a target for greed. I focused on rebuilding not just the business but myself, pouring energy back into design, into connecting with my team, into reaffirming the values I had built Elysian on. It was a slow process, healing the wounds left by the battle. The company thrived again, stronger, more resilient. And I was stronger too. Sometimes, late at night, working in my studio, I think about that trademark document. Filed by Sarah Jenkins, a young woman full of hope and naive trust. It was a lifeline thrown across the years, a silent witness to the truth of who created this brand. It was more than just a legal paper. It was a testament to my independent spirit, a monument to the fact that my identity and my worth were not, and never had been, defined by my marriage. Life is quieter now. The drama is over. But the lesson remains. Build your dreams with passion, yes. But protect them too. Leave your mark. Leave a paper trail more powerful than any emotion, because sometimes that's all you have left when the world tries to take what's yours. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.